America, I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin. Before we get started this evening, I want to make a comment. I watched this clip of Barack Obama on 60 Minutes where he's attacking the President of the United States, and he believes these challenges that are taking place in the states are undermining democracy. He's put out an 800-page book. You'd think he's Winston Churchill. I think this is his third autobiography. Well, I want to say something to President Obama, the other so-called iconic figures in our republic, Republican and Democrat. Don't you damn lecture us. For 4 damn years, the FBI was involved in trying to undermine this president. The intelligence services trying to undermine this president. They tried to remove this president from office, a phony criminal investigation, a phony impeachment. One effort after another, the Russia hoax. You dragged the American people through the dirt, through your politics, because you wouldn't accept democracy, you wouldn't accept the Constitution of the United States, and now everybody's supposed to roll over. 72 million people voted for this president, and up to 72 million people don't like what they're seeing right now. Now let me explain the problem to the media. You're going around and putting microphones in the faces of state officials. Do you see any fraud here? Do you see any fraud here? They're the defendants in these lawsuits. You know, the good old days, we'd have reporters in the field looking into the allegations where we have hundreds of sworn affidavits under penalty of perjury from one end of this country to another, in one corrupt Democrat city after another. The machines will not allow our volunteer lawyers to get in and find out what's taking place. And so this is hard work. Instead, the media are fighting them. We have Democrats fighting them. We have propagandists fighting them, rather than trying to get to the bottom of this. Now, Al Gore had 37 days in frivolous lawsuits in 3 counties, 2 visits to the state Supreme Court, 2 visits to the United States Supreme Court. And what we hear is people declaring who aren't even involved in these cases, who haven't even talked to anybody on the ground. It's over. It's over. Well, it may be over. It may not be over. What about the integrity of the election process? Let me explain in part what's going on in this country. Democrats and their surrogates in hundreds of lawsuits leading up to this election. What did they do? Earlier and earlier voting. Why? Why? I'll get to that in a second. Mail-in ballots. Why? Ballot harvesting. Why? No signatures, no comparing of signatures, no postal mark dates, extended vote counting. None of this is about good government. None of this is about the integrity of the election. They are enshrining and institutionalizing fraud. They're destroying the security measures that exist. The reason they want earlier and earlier voting and later counting and more mail-in votes is because when you show up to vote, the chances of fraud are minimal. There's election judges, there's registrations, you have to show your address and your name, you have to show an ID and so forth. If you have a mail-in vote that you don't even have to sign, and you don't have a postal date on it, you have no security whatsoever. And so basically what's going on here is the Democrat Party, which has created these conditions for the first time in many states. That's why this is going on and on and on, not because of the challenges, but because of the changes in the election laws. So the Democrat Party says it's over, and they push out Joe Biden. The office of the president-elect, we don't have an office of a president-elect. We have one president at a time, and Joe Biden is undermining that president, Donald Trump. We don't have 2 foreign policies at the same time. We don't have 2 environmental policies at the same time. What's their hurry? They're the ones undermining democracy. And finally, they're the ones announcing how they're going to destroy our Constitution. They say, hurry up. We're undermining democracy. And if they win the races in Georgia, they're going to destroy the Supreme Court, destroy the Senate, destroy the legislative process, and destroy the Electoral College, and cut out all the red states from voting. But we're undermining democracy. No. Obama's undermining democracy. Biden's undermining democracy. Their whole damn party's undermining democracy. And it's about time the media in this country pay attention to what the hell's going on. Go into these cities. Follow the volunteer lawyers and see exactly what's taking place. And give us a hand so we can protect the right to vote and the franchise. Now, I've said enough. We have a tremendous guest who's going to have an opportunity to speak. Kayleigh McEnany, who for purposes of our discussion is the campaign advisor, or a campaign advisor, to the Trump campaign. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. That was very well said.
Well, I wanted you to come on the program for several reasons. Number one, you're a trained lawyer. You graduated from Harvard Law School. Number two, you're an extraordinarily smart individual. People do not give you an opportunity to speak, whether it's at a press conference or other places. Number three, you have compiled what is significant evidence of fraud, not an email that says, look at this, we have 200,000 ballots. That's not the way it works. You got to find instances of fraud, patterns, and you have to follow them. And we don't have subpoena power, like the government does. What have you found? Give us some examples.
Yeah, quite a bit, Mark. And you hit the nail on the head that for a long time, for decades, in these Democrat-run cities, they have designed a system that no one has challenged, where it has been rife with fraud. I have hundreds of pages of affidavits here, Michigan alone, where they saw ballots, piles of ballots going through machines multiple times, where they saw that when a name was not matched or found in the voter records, they were just logged in with the birthday January 1, 1900. Example after example. And this is an old system, an old fraudulent system. And it took this president winning new states like Pennsylvania and Michigan to finally challenge the old system. But more than even the instances of fraud we found, Mark, you hit the nail on the head back in September. You called this when there were Democrat secretaries of states around this country redesigning our election systems, flouting the state legislatures who under Article 1, Section 4 has the power to determine the time, manner, and place of elections. Flouting that and changing and redesigning a system. Nevada, no greater example, where when they did the mass mail-out voting in the primary, you had ballots languishing in trash cans, pinned on apartment dartboards. And what did they do again in the general election? Mail out ballots across the state and really across the country when you look at these states and the way they've been sending it out. And our lawyers described it to me this way. It was like sending live ammunition out across the country that was bound to be harnessed and used in a fraudulent manner. And make no mistake, it was.
Kayleigh, all of these changes are intended to help the Democrat Party. All of them. They don't improve the voting system. They don't improve the integrity of the vote. They certainly don't help the Republicans, who mostly vote in person, where they have all these checks and balances in place. It's not the Republicans talking about, if we win one election, we're going to destroy the judiciary and destroy the United States Senate and so forth. And yet you can see the Thomas Friedman types, the media, and the Democrats, they all speak in one voice, demanding that we hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. It takes an assistant U.S. attorney months and sometimes years to bring one tax fraud case. You're talking about at least 6
cast that yet.
With massive populations, where these volunteer lawyers that are working for the Trump campaign have to find ways to interview individuals who make allegations. There's no subpoena powers and so forth. And they say, let's hurry up, hurry up. They really want to hurry up because they want to kill this fellow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you're right that it takes time to do this. But what we've managed to find in just, 7+ days, we found quite a bit. People who are really willing in their own handwriting to write down their allegation, put
That
their
spell
name
isn't
down,
ready yet.
sign their allegation with a notary there, sworn testimony under penalty of perjury. And what is remarkable is the consistency with which the affidavits read, of poll watchers being pushed out in Michigan, literally physically pushed. One young woman called the C word, another one of our poll watchers who was a man of Chinese descent being yelled at and said, why are you here? You're not an American. And when he said, I am an American, he was proceeded to be shouted down for 5 minutes. These people deserve to be heard, and finally you have a president doing just that. But these Democrat secretaries of state, I can't express enough, Mark, what they have done. I recall when our campaign lawyers came to the president, this was months ago, saying, look at what they're doing across the country. They are redesigning a system, like Secretary Bookvar out in Pennsylvania, saying you can receive ballots up to 3 days after Election Day. No, they don't have to be postmarked. Her telling the Supreme Court, I'm not going to count those ballots. I'm keeping them to the side. The Supreme Court saying, okay, we believe you. And then she changes her guidance, and it takes Justice Alito to rebuke her. They were consistently misrepresenting their opinion, changing deadlines, designing a a system to prop up Democrats and Joe Biden.
So my question to you, Kaylee, is the New York Times reporters, the Washington Post reporters, NBC, ABC, CBS, are they contacting you about any of these constitutional violations for your input? Are they asking you about any of these affidavits because they want to send reporters in the field and pursue them and to see if there's any kind of a pattern? We have a postal worker in Pennsylvania, as an example, who's being pressured to recant, who says he hasn't recanted, even though the Washington Post said he did recant without interviewing him. You getting any inquiries of concerns about any of this fraud?
No, not at all. In fact, I've had several reporters come to me and ask, what are my general thoughts about the election? I'll detail for them these affidavits. I'll detail for them these equal protection claims. And they just stare blankly. They stare blankly. And I remember, look, I asked them with the Hunter Biden laptop, where we had a laptop, we had evidence, we had Joe Biden not denying the authenticity of the laptops. I remember going back to the press corps and saying, hey, why won't you guys cover this? And again, the same blank stare. Because it's immediately, if you say the word Hunter, they shut down. If you say the word fraud, they shut down. There's a lack of journalistic curiosity in this country for anything that behooves President Trump and his movement and the 72 million voters who showed up to vote for him. And it is egregious, it's irresponsible, but luckily they're so blatant with their bias that the American people see right through it.
When we come back, I want to discuss with you this question now. First, the media said there is no fraud. Now the media say, well, there's not a lot of fraud. And now the media say, well, there's not enough fraud to overturn the election. I want to pursue this line of illogic and irrationality with you when we return. We'll be right back. The Equal Protection Clause, Kaylee, is really quite important. It shows up twice in our Constitution, 14th Amendment. It's one of the Civil War amendments, and it applies to all the people in this country. It applies to voting. In Bush versus Gore, back in 2000, the majority in the court recognized that there was unequal treatment of voters in the state of Florida, where we also had a rogue Supreme Court, and we had Al Gore, who was trying to litigate his way into the presidency, as opposed to Donald Trump, who's trying to litigate and make sure that every legal vote counts and every illegal vote is dismissed. But even more than that, you have in Pennsylvania a number of steps that were taken that violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And I want your opinion on this. This is in the filing. It's in a filing that was filed last Monday. It's plain as day. They have evidence of disparate treatment. And I see this reported almost nowhere. They'll just throw out the Equal Protection Clause, and they don't explain the problems that apply in Equal Protection Clause. Use your background as a Harvard Law School graduate. What are they talking about in Pennsylvania about the violations of the Equal Protection Clause?
Yes, very important. Voting is a fundamental right in this country, and equal protection is an important component of protecting that right. There has to be uniform standards across the state, and what we found is we have evidence of this in Pennsylvania. There was nothing of the sort. There was the disparate treatment you mentioned, and here are the affidavits we have. In blue counties, 7 blue counties, voters were being contacted by Democrat candidates and outside organizations saying your ballot has been canceled, come and fix it. They were doing this despite the fact that the Supreme Court in the state said there's no way to fix ballots in advance. It's illegal to open ballots before election day. But in the 7 Democrat counties, they were able to fix their ballot. The other 60 counties, the Republican counties, voters were not able to fix their ballot. One woman said, I've been voting absentee for 15 years, turned in my ballot, did it by hand, and she found out only after the election that the ballot was canceled. Equal protection is central to this, and then secondly, I'll be real quick with this, Mark, on the counting of the ballots. We have evidence of this as well, that the legislature sent me a signature, a postmark, and an address, but they were counting ballots without a signature, postmark, or address in these blue counties. This could amount to tens of thousands of ballots. People must have the equal amount of franchisement in this country, and in Pennsylvania, there was nothing of the sort.
Exactly. And also, there was this problem. People who vote in person, you have to show up at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or you don't get the vote. You can show up at 8:05 p.m. Eastern Time, and say, look, I'm late because I was kidnapped, and my mother was ill, and my brother was hit by a car at 8:05. No excuses, nothing. On the other hand, if you mail in a ballot, we don't really know when you voted, because as you say, the Supreme Court removed the whole postage stamp. We don't even know if it's you who voted, because you're not required to sign it. And if you do sign it and the signatures don't match, it doesn't matter. We're going to count it anyway. That's clear, disparate treatment between people who show up and vote in person and people who are using mail-in ballots. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, it's 5-2, 5 leftist rogue justices on that court, just like there were rogue justices on the Florida court. Now, my question to you is, with all this pressure and all this propaganda by Obama and his ilk all over TV, talking about President-elect Biden, and Biden talking about the office of the President-elect, you want to talk about dictator, there it is. Do you think that kind of pressure is going to have an effect on the Supreme Court justices, among others, who are supposed to make these decisions based on the law and the Constitution?
Oh, I certainly hope not. And when we look at some of the opinions that have been written, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch had a wonderful concurrence where he said essentially what they've done is they're taking a pandemic and using that pandemic to change the rules. And he said, I understand it's challenging in the middle of a pandemic to vote, but there are ways to do this, and we don't need to rush to change voting laws at the last minute, because it will end up disenfranchising people. I mean, he's exactly right. They took a global pandemic, they made it into an electoral epidemic. They took what they said a natural disaster was their rationale, and they turned this into a national election disaster. I think we have principled jurists, Alito, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett. I think ultimately they will side on the side of truth and justice and vet these claims. And it's really thankful to President Trump for putting in place principled jurists who want to make sure there's no fraud in our elections and care about election integrity.
And I would just say this to the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. Your pass on Pennsylvania was incomprehensible. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, as you know, specifically states that the state legislature will determine who the electors are. That is, the election laws. There's no issue of federalism in there. And what is, for the audience, what Justice Roberts did is he, in one case, where there was a state court a federal court that interfered, he said, well, federal courts can't interfere with the state legislatures. In Pennsylvania, because of the Supreme Court, he took a pass. And he gives some silly poetic recognition of federalism. That's a state court. That's not what Article 2 of the federal Constitution says. It has nothing to do with federalism. It says the state legislature shall determine how the electors are appointed. Not the governor, not some Secretary of State, Board of Election, the Supreme Court of the state, not the Tooth Fairy, nobody. The state legislature makes the decision. Not even the Supreme Court of the United States. So I would just say here, Justice Roberts, it's in plain fact, it's part of the clearest language in the Constitution that's imaginable. If the Chief Justice of the United States won't uphold the Constitution, if the Chief Justice of the United States will bow to the mob, then we will not have lawful elections from this day forward. And I would warn the Supreme Court, if the Republicans lose the races in Georgia, they're coming for you. You justices want to be passive in the face of tyranny? All you have to do is uphold your part of the bargain, the Constitution. The Senate is going to destroy the United States Supreme Court. They've made it abundantly clear. So it's time for the Chief Justice of the United States to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Any final comments, Kaylee?
Yeah, just to echo that, what was particularly egregious in the case of what Justice Roberts did with the Supreme Court there in Pennsylvania is he decided to take a Democrat Secretary of State who had tweeted anti-Trump tweets, who had tweeted putting the word president in front of the word Trump is an insult to the office. He took her at her word that she was going to segregate and not count ballots. In a mere matter of days, she changed her guidance. You cannot take these secretaries of state at their word. We must fight this. We must make sure our elections have integrity for this election and for the elections to come.
The funny thing, while she was destroying the electoral system, and by that disenfranchising voters, she referenced the Civil Rights Act That is the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the suffragettes. This is what the left do. They use the Constitution to destroy the Constitution. Kayleigh McEnany, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for all you've done. God bless you and good luck.
Thanks, Mark. You too.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. I want to take a very close look at the media and what's going on before, during, and after the election, the polls, and now what's taking place. Joe Concha is a Fox News contributor. I want to congratulate you on that, Joe. You're an absolutely outstanding commentator. You're also the media columnist on the opinion side for The Hill. And so I want to ask you about the media. First of all, these polls before the election. One or two groups had it right. A lot of these news groups say we're just reporting them, but I see a lot of news groups that say the Washington Post / somebody else poll, and a lot of these, the NBC / maybe Washington Post poll. So the media are in on this. This is 2 election cycles in a row where the Democrat was supposed to win as if this were Reagan versus Carter, Reagan versus Mondale, some massive electoral landslide. And they're off by double digits. How do you explain that?
The numbers, Mark, are astoundingly bad in terms of polling. You look at some of the numbers. New York Times had Joe Biden at a 70% chance of winning Florida, had him up 10 in Ohio, 9 in Iowa. You mentioned ABC News. They do a poll with the Washington Post. They had Trump down 17 points in Wisconsin in their final poll. You had CNN having Joe Biden up 12 nationally. So every poll got this wrong, and you would think from 2016, to your point, that we would have learned our lesson in terms of polling, in terms of President Trump, in terms of the hidden Trump vote, people just not wanting to say that they support the president because of cancel culture and retribution, perhaps, even with an anonymous pollster. And by the way, isn't polling kind of antiquated at this point? We communicate in so many different ways, Mark. We go through our phone, even with the obnoxious yellow cover. We go through text messages. We go through email. Who's answering a landline anymore? And the problem is that our news organizations then take a poll and present it as breaking news, as actual fact, instead of, look at it this way, it's like when you have a steak, all right? A poll can be news in terms of you could sprinkle it like salt on a steak, but it's not the steak. It's a complementary part, a snapshot in time, but we have to stop reporting these things as absolute fact because you end up possibly suppressing votes as a result when you have, say, for instance, President Trump down 17 in the Badger State.
And it's not like they didn't know that they were having problems with these polls. You know, there were a couple of groups out there, Trafalgar and 1 or 2 others, that kept saying they're not polling right. They're not getting to people who are going to vote. Because they're using, as you say, these traditional means to try and contact them, but people aren't all at the other end of those traditional communications means, but they wouldn't change course.
And you are.
You think that affects an election? There was a wonderful piece by James Baker in the Wall Street Journal and said, hey, this is so bad that both parties should object to it, and that it can affect an election.
I'm afraid, Mark, that in 2024, we're probably going to see the same process done over and over again. Because here's the problem. Many media outlets, they just want to report this stuff because it's easy, right? You got a number, you throw it out there.
Embrace the shadow.
14 nationally, shut off the lights and say goodnight. So that's the thing. It's an easy thing to report, but it doesn't really tell you much. And particularly when now no one trusts polls, I would think at this point. I applaud Frank Luntz because at least he said, you know what, maybe we should get into real estate at this point because this is devastating for our industry. But we have short-term memories.
Goodbye.
So when we have another presidential election that starts in 2 years, believe it or not, we're going to see polls over and over again telling us how this person's leading this person. And quite frankly, it don't mean nothing.
And while they're pushing these don't mean nothing polls, other things were going on in the country that the media utterly ignored or didn't find. Hundreds of lawsuits being brought in state after state after state by the Democrat Party and their surrogates to change the way we vote in states. Massive mail-in voting. Some states no signatures. Some states no signature comparison. Some states no postal marks. Some states on and on and on. That had more to change the landscape in this election. And it was strategic, it was network. The Biden campaign was involved. We now have reports on this. Surrogate groups were involved. I saw almost no reporting on this on the major television networks. Did you see a lot of reporting on this?
I don't see anything. I did see a lot of reporting in 2016 where I was told over and over again, and not even 2016, all the way up until 2019 in the conclusion of the Mueller report, that our election was hacked, that it was interfered with by the Russians, that vote tallies were changed. And then, speaking of polls, 62% of Democrats actually believe that voting tallies were changed in 2016 and that Hillary Clinton had the election stolen from her. And she said over and over again, and I got that she conceded right after the election, but then she went on a 4-year public therapy tour talking about how the President of the United States is
Trust no one.
And then she had this to say just a couple of weeks ago, quote, Joe Biden should
I'm
not concede
listening.
under any circumstances because I think this is going to drag out. And eventually, I do believe we will win if we don't give an inch. And if we're as
Trust
focused and
no
relentless
one.
as the other side is. She also said we've got to have a massive legal operation. Wow. That sounds like she thought
I have exactly what
and as a result,
Be clear
we should
about
go
your
down
business.
every legal avenue to make sure that every legal vote is counted and every illegal vote is tossed
Victory
out.
for
That's Hillary
Sylvanus.
Clinton telling Joe Biden that. Now,
I haven't
President
got
Trump
all
is
day.
literally conducting
Watch your back.
himself and his campaign and his legal team in that exact fashion, and he's being told, you need to concede now. This is bad for the country. It's an absolute joke, and it's absolutely sad, Mark.
When we come back, Joe Concha, I want to ask you, who is it that's undermining democracy? Barack Obama, who has accused the President of the United States for going through these legal challenges? You know, you do have a right to canvassing. Some of it's automatic. You do have a right to challenge the vote.
I have exactly what you
and you do
need.
have a right to go to court. Is that undermining our democratic system like Obama says? Or did Obama and his administration undermine our democratic system with his rogue FBI, the rogue FISA courts, and the rogue intelligence agencies? We'll be right back.
Beware.
Joe Concha, media analyst for the
And
Hill,
you
contributor, all-around good guy. Very quickly,
What?
what undermines democracy more? The Obama administration and what they did before Donald Trump became president and while he was in the campaign, spies in his campaign, Russia collusion, you know the whole story, I won't repeat it, or the President of the United States today following the legal processes that already exist in the states and following them to the end. What undermines democracy more?
Mark, I'm going to chalk that up to a rhetorical question. I think your question kind of answers the question, right? I could talk about how the media divides the country more than ever, and I base that on a Gallup poll with the Knight Foundation just conducted last month that found, and it's disturbing, 84% of Americans believe that the media bears the blame for divide in this country. Wow. And if you think it's always been that way, no. 1976, Gallup, trust in media. 3/4 of the country trusted the media then. Can you believe that? Now it's been turned on its head. They don't even think that the media is informing us anymore. They think it's actually dividing us. And what I've seen before and after the campaign,
What now?
are isms being shifted. We've gone from journalism to activism now. And I'll give you a couple examples around that. CNN Town Hall with Joe Biden.
Beware,
They have 16
our
questions from
enemies
the audience.
abound.
13 from Democrats, 3 from Republicans. You would think that would be a little bit more even if your goal is to actually inform voters. Then we go to ABC. They present this average, everyday Democratic voter who asks a question of Joe Biden. Problem is that average, everyday Democratic voter was actually a speechwriter in the Obama-Biden administration. You don't think ABC could have vetted that? Or, then again, was it a mistake? Or why did these mistakes go the same direction every time? And then NBC does a town hall also with Joe Biden. It's only supposed to be, this is how they advertise it, undecided voters. The problem was that there were plenty of Biden undecided voters that actually already declared that they were voting for Joe Biden. And I know this because they said it literally on MSNBC air just a couple of weeks before that. Again, is this journalism or is this activism, Mark?
Yeah, you're exactly right. We might chalk that up to a rhetorical question, but I think you're exactly right. Here, Joe Concha, let me ask you this. Obama's being interviewed on 60 Minutes about his 800-page time. 800 pages. You know, that's about 700 pages too long. He's not asked a single question about the role of his administration or what knowledge he may have had in the January meeting before he left office. Any knowledge whatsoever what the FBI was doing, any knowledge whatsoever what the Hillary Clinton campaign was doing with the dossier, any knowledge of any of that. There we finally have an opportunity to ask this president questions about his administration, not what he thinks about what's going on. His administration, what his administration did, not one question. Isn't that what you're pointing out? Activism versus efforts at objective journalism.
Right, and 60 Minutes has been on for more than 50 years, Mark. It's the most highly rated broadcast news magazine in the country by a country mile, and a top 10 show on television. Here you have a former president of the United States. You have pertinent questions that you can ask him besides the softballs. In fact, they're not even softballs. It's kind of like the way that I play wiffle ball with my 5-year-old. It's like, okay, you ready? You ready? Here it is. And that's the problem. It's a joke, and we saw it with Joe Biden before this election as well. 5 press conferences in 200 days. And it's not like those press conferences consisted of any
Farewell.
questions like what the president gets. Oh no, this was much different. You had Joe Biden actually having staffers ask questions of reporters. Joe Biden couldn't even do that himself. And I don't use this word very often, but why is Joe Biden a coward when it comes to actually talking to the press? If he's so confident in his arguments, he's been around for 47 years, then you would think he would just call on people randomly in the same fashion that President Trump does. You can say what you will about President Trump, but he took more questions during his 4 years than any president that occupied the office for 8 years. And they were oftentimes hostile. You know, we've heard about the Me Too movement as it pertains to sexual harassment. Well, there's the Look at Me Too movement that occurred during all of President Trump's press conferences in terms of journalists actually conducting soapbox journalism to get to a fight with the president, because there weren't really questions that were being asked. No, it was more like speeches, advocating a side and then tossing it to the president. A fight eventually, a verbal one anyway, eventually breaks out. Then that reporter goes on the air afterwards, talks about how he or she was victimized. Then before you know it, hey, they got a book out. So yeah, that's what we saw during the President Trump's administration as far as a hostile press. And now Joe Biden, when he comes in, he's only had 1 press conference since last Tuesday.
What are you requiring?
And those questions were 5 questions. 4 about President Trump. Is that a softball or what? When you ask somebody about their opponent, it's incredible.
All right, Joe Concha.
Speak
We'll be right back.
quickly.
Joe Concha. Joe Biden didn't talk a lot about policy, but they did put a 110-page manifesto out that is quite radical, and very few people have read. I read it from front to back. It's basically Bernie Sanders' agenda. And so far, the office of the president-elect has announced policies, God forbid, in my view, should he become president, that are quite radical. And he's surrounding himself with 2 types of people, lobbyists and radicals. Am I right? Am I wrong? Or who knows?
Who knows? And I think what we have to look at now is January 5th in Georgia and the firewall that could exist between a radical House, or at least the radical side of the Democratic Party taking over the House. And then if you have a Republican Senate, a lot of that legislation can't get to a President Biden if you have a Republican Senate as a firewall. So all eyes on Georgia. And let me tell you about activism again, by the way. Here you have Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, goes on the New York Governor's Brothers show on CNN and implores people, pick up your lives and move to Georgia so you can vote in that election to impact that and make sure that the Democrats get a 50-50 split in the Senate. That means Kamala Harris is the tie-breaking vote. Can you believe that? Again, activism. You have John Meacham, by the way, and he's a presidential historian, supposed to be bipartisan. He actually endorses Joe Biden, but then it gets worse. He's writing speeches for Joe Biden, but the problem is that he's also an MSNBC contributor at the time, and what he says is Joe Biden does a speech, Meacham goes on afterwards and praises the speech, actually praises quotes in the speech that he probably included without telling the audience that he was actually the speechwriter behind them. So this is what I mean about activism in this particular race here. But the bottom line is, Mark, as far as policy is concerned and what we haven't talked about and what we didn't talk about during the campaign, how many questions did you see on trade? I think the USMCA was a pretty big deal. How about China? Outside of coronavirus, how are you going to deal with China, Mr. Vice President? Didn't hear much about that at all as well. gun policy. Apparently, Beto O'Rourke is going to be in charge of that. Would like to hear a little bit more about Mr. Biden's positions as far as the Second Amendment is concerned. How about foreign policy? Is ISIS not a thing anymore? Al-Qaeda? Of course, nothing on that regard as well, or NATO. And then finally, automation, which I think is a very, very important issue that nobody talks about. More and more AI, artificial intelligent robots, over low-wage jobs. And I'd love to hear what President Trump as a businessman or Joe Biden, as 47 years in politics, would do about that in terms of possibly retraining these workers or keeping these folks employed. None of those issues were explored. Instead, we got a whole boatload of climate change and social issues, and it didn't get us anywhere in terms of informing us truly where these two men stood. Mark?
And neither was his background. 47 years in Washington, 8 years as vice president, almost 40 years as a senator. His record was almost never discussed by the media, and there was a lot to discuss. The comments he made about race early in his career, his working with these segregationists, this wasn't just a legislative thing. The things he said about not wanting to send his kids into what would be an integrated community into a jungle, they protected him all along on these issues. It was really quite an abomination. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the things he said about very decent people, the character assassination. Again, he was never forced to answer for any of that. He was never questioned about any of that. This is the damnedest campaign I've ever seen in modern American history, that a Democrat candidate can basically hide out, that the media will protect him, he will not be questioned, and now he's all over the place claiming he has an office of the president-elect where he won't shut the hell up about all kinds of policies and attacks on Donald Trump. Joe Contra, I want to thank you, my friend. Welcome to Fox, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
This had better be good. Remember, patience, discipline.
Be quick about your business. Dark Lady, watch over you. And you are.
Your time has passed.
I do all my own manufacturing in my home state of Minnesota.
I really like the fact that it was made in the USA. I think that USA products are a better quality product. I've tried a lot of other pillows.
Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We now have Connie Jane Kramer. She is the co-head and partner with her mom, Amy Kramer. We had Amy on last week. It did, quite frankly, a breathtaking job with almost no resources to put together, I think, one of the seminal events in MAGA history. Connie Jane, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Steve, and absolutely. I mean, the fact that we were able to not only do this in 4 days to get all the permits, the staging, everything, but the turnout was absolutely unbelievable. But you know what? It's very reminiscent back in the Tea Party days. My mom was one of the original co-founders of the Tea Party movement, and we saw grassroots rising up because they were very unhappy with the way the direction of the country was going. And we're absolutely seeing that now with this election, and people feel like it's being stolen from President Donald J. Trump. And so we just had a massive amount of people. There have been estimates over 1 million people here descending on Washington, D.C. this past weekend, and we're incredibly grateful.
Yeah, we're showing, as we have your voice up now, we're showing the footage of what you were able to accomplish. Here's what I think, because I was there at the beginning of the Tea Party and saw the amazing job your mom and others did, in that it was so new and fresh and different at the time. Here, there's so much hate and so much intimidation, and so many people have kind of peeled off because they don't want to lose their job or they don't. What amazed me was the turnout, the scale of it, but also the tone of it. The positive nature, in that we're not going to back off. These are tough people, they have grit, determination, but the positive nature of this, how inclusive it was, how diverse it was, how many different voices you had. And the scale of it was massive. I know you guys had had no money to do this, but it's even more powerful than the beginnings of the Tea Party movement because the forces aligned against it have kind of, been actively involved in being aligned against it, where the Tea Party at the beginning caught everybody by surprise. This is, they've been waiting for it, and they had no intention. I got to tell you, what you did on Saturday absolutely changed the discussion in this town, because now they realize, hey, Trumpism is so big, right? It's so positive. It's such a rising force that it can't be stopped, and it's changed the calculation. Hey, trust me, these state legislatures in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona are taking note of that. So how did you guys pull it off in just a couple of days with no money?
Exactly, Steve. And it goes back to our days being in the Tea Party movement, where we didn't have very many resources. And, one of the most incredible things about the Tea Party movement, and especially now, is women stepping up. And we just get stuff done, whether it's with children or, Bible study with your church. I mean, we just get stuff done. And I will tell you, big tech, especially these last couple weeks, have really come down on us. And we thought that was going to have a significant impact. Facebook stopped my group, Stop the Steal, when it had 365,000 people. It was growing by 1,000 people every 10 seconds when they shut it down. Then MailChimp came after us, and they not only disabled our account, but they kept all of our data and will not let me have access to it. Then Eventbrite did the same thing. They shut down our account, and then not only did they shut it down, but they emailed all the thousands of people that had RSVP'd and told them that the event was canceled. And look what happened. We're going back to kind of archaic times and in reference to technology, where it's really picking up the phone call, texting your friends, and making those one-on-one personal interactions. And droves and droves and droves of people just came and descended on DC. And, I think that when you're determined, you can make anything happen. Certainly, we're stretched thin with donation or with, resources. But if people want to make a donation, they can go to TrumpMarch.com, because we're going to be back here in December 12th. It's 2 days before the Electoral College, and we will be here again with the same presence, letting them know that we will not be going away. And next weekend, we will be in Georgia at the state capitol, because we're really focused on that recount, and then also those 2 Senate seats. So, I know a lot of people have been a little overwhelmed, thinking that we should already be over with the election at this point, but we just got to keep going. And, holidays will come, and we'll be able to celebrate when we get another 4 years of President Donald J. Trump.
I'm out of range.
Okay, what day? What are you going to be at the? Do you have a date yet for when you're going to be at the state capitol in Georgia?
Yes, it is the 21st, next Saturday at noon, and then the next event will be December 12th here in Washington D.C. as well. So TrumpMarch.com, it will all be listed there.
Is there other social media they can get to now that's up? And
it's too far away.
Yes, our personal Twitter accounts we're using, and then also at Women for Trump and at Women for America First, and just help spread the word. But honestly, Steve, one of the most powerful things is that just save the image on your phone and text it to 10 friends, and then ask them to text it to 10 more friends, because of big tech censorship. It's just unreal. It truly is unreal what they're trying to do to silence the American people. And they're talking about, Russian interference. They talked about a PP tape for 4 years, and really it's going on here in the United States, election interference from big tech. It truly is astonishing.
Yeah, the oligarchs. They're trying to shut you down. Kylie Jane Kramer.
I can't attack that target.
We're going to emphasize this every show. Thank you so much, and say hi to you.
Thanks, Steve.
Fantastic job. Incredible job. This afternoon, I want to give heads up. We're going to have more of your interviews, particularly about the diversity of this crowd. Jag Max is the first one to pick up, hey, they got Republic of Vietnam flags. They had the new federal state of China. This was a gathering of many different voices and many different forces in one setting to to show that freedom and this thing of populism is going throughout the world. We're going to have some additional interviews, Maggie, that you're going to have in the afternoon show.
Yep, I've been busy editing. It's going to be some great content coming up soon.
I tell you what, it's so amazing, Kylie Jenner, what they've done. Okay, now talk about, and I actually made a film, I think it was 8 years ago, called Fire from the Heartland, about the women of the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party movement was all driven, it was female driven. Guys talk, women do. Women get things done, right? And that's why the Tea Party movement had such a massive impact. Michelle Bachmann, Sarah Palin, Jenny Beth Martin, Amy Kramer, across the board, right? Kylie Jane Kramer, she was a young girl at that time. So it was and this with this new, you can see this new Trump at the foreground is being driven by women, which I think is fantastic. Talk about a woman who's tough as boot leather. We now have Liz. You're on. Liz, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Steve.
So I want you to walk through the whole thing. Walk through. We've now got an intellectual on a global basis, Archbishop Vigano. But the report, they're trying to take him down in a classic. This is a classic what the globalists try to do, right? They identify people who are leaders and they try to destroy them. Walk us through what's happening with Archbishop Vigano, his letters, and how they're trying to kill this guy.
Sure. The long-awaited McCarrick report from the Vatican finally came down last week, and it did not surprise anybody because it was typical Francis. It was hefty, 450 pages, but short on truth and long on propaganda. And basically what the report did was to cover and protect poor Francis for his handling of McCarrick and to throw Archbishop Vigano, the whistleblower, under the bus and blame him for McCarrick. We would not have even had a McCarrick report had it not been for Vigano stepping up and blowing the whistle on Pope Francis, who he told that Cardinal McCarrick was a terrible serial predator and that he was put out to pasture by Benedict. He told Francis this. Francis ignored it and sent McCarrick off on his merry way to China and to start negotiating with the communists. So the report is astonishing in the gall that Francis has. But immediately Archbishop Vigano responded by a letter. He called out each and every lie in the report. Then he went on Raymond Arroyo's television program and further delineated what was actually going on. This is a pope like Joe Biden that is a globalist. They are at the very least communist apologists, and they have been installed to carry out the globalist agenda. Vigano understands this. Faithful Catholics understand this. And so this McCarrick report, which mentioned Vigano 306 times, so precisely the whole agenda was to destroy the reputation of Vigano, who frankly, like Donald Trump, has really stepped into the shoes of the Catholic leader, has replaced the Pope of faithful Catholics. And so the Pope had to take him down. And I think that shows you the nature of this Pope, his sniping comments about Vigano.
Yeah, I want to give everybody a QAnon alert, okay, because I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but there are no coincidences. McCarrick is now Mr. McCarrick, right? Yeah. He goes from being what is called the American Pope. He's the Cardinal here in Washington, D.C., a complete powerhouse, right? He's the guy that's one of the most depraved of all the pedophiles in the church and actually promoting other pedophiles around him, correct? He's also the guy he's the centerpiece, he's the mastermind in back of the deal with the CCP. He's the guy that actually goes, and as Miles Gross says, hey, they got these guys on two things. One, they're giving them cash. The other thing is they're blackmailing them because they understand all how debauched they are. So walk us through, why is McCarrick's into this whole Joe Biden, I'm a good Catholic. He and Biden are thick as thieves. So there's no conspiracies, but there's no coincidences. Walk us through the coincidences around Mr. McCarrick.
Okay, number one, he was in charge of restarting the CCP negotiations with the Vatican in its secret deal. where there's secrecy, there's Ted McCarrick. McCarrick was sent to China at least 3, possibly 4 times to do the bidding of Francis. And it ended up in a secret deal that was renewed a couple months ago. Secondly, McCarrick and Biden and Francis were behind the secret negotiations to normalize relations with the United States and Cuba. This is the Cuba deal that was the centerpiece of much of the Obama-Biden administration's second term. And just to show you how horrible this deal was, the Cuban Americans didn't forget. You know, and because the election wasn't stolen down in Florida, we know that the Cuban Americans came out in great support for Trump because they knew that Joe Biden had pushed this normalization agreement with the brutal regime that, you know, killed many of their relatives.
Don't turn it off.
A regime that they fled to the United States seeking freedom. So,
am I done crying?
This is our globalist
No, don't. This is. I don't want you to kill my character. That's cheating if you kill it.
Furthermore, you know, we don't know who's getting more money from the CCP. The Biden family.
Because you want me to die, well, I have to die normal.
That's what it's come down to. And in the middle of
otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. If you get me killed, I mean, you can get me killed anytime. That doesn't mean anything.
He has been known to be the promoter of the.
See the silver around? That means that's a rare.
At the march. People understand this, Steve.
Golds are means that they're like super tough. Oh my gosh, I'm already like full of stuff.
McCarrick and Francis.
Yeah.
Liz,
borrow my printer.
Liz, we got to balance, but on outside of the football, you have Cardinal Zen and you have Archbishop Vigano. On their side of the football, you have Mr. McCarrick and you have Pope Francis. By the way, Mr. McCarrick, I think he's the most senior in the history of the church. I think he's the most senior cardinal to ever been laicized, ever been basically kicked out.
That spell isn't ready yet.
This is what you're dealing with. Remember, Pope Francis, his number one thing is climate change. In 16, he says you're not a Christian if you want to build walls, like on the southern border. Okay, we're going to return Michael Matt from the Remnant next.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Just like you, I had problems sleeping. I tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. 15 years ago, I invented MyPillow. It took me 2 years to develop because I wanted to have everything you would ever want in a pillow. I made sure that you could adjust my patented fill so you could have the exact support you need as an individual regardless of your sleep position. I also wanted a pillow that would last, so I made MyPillow machine washable and dryable. I back MyPillow with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Not only that, I do all my own manufacturing in my home state of Minnesota.
I really like the fact that it was made in the USA. I think USA products are a better quality product. I've tried a lot of other pillows and nothing's worked like MyPillow.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now to give you deep discounts, not just on my pillows, but also my mattress topper, sheets, and so much more. For example, you can get body pillows regular $89.99, now only $29.99, or my pillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
I used to think that sheets were just sheets. I got the Giza Dream sheets. They are the most comfortable sheets I've ever had.
The Go Anywhere pillow is so easy to just roll up and take anywhere I want to go. Go Anywhere pillow is really comfortable, so that's what I really like. It's nice and supportive and it's nice and small.
The MyPillow topper, for the first time, has enabled me to have a cool night's sleep. I'm able to go to bed and just get rest.
That's 3 inches of wonderful that's in the MyPillow mattress topper. It's just like a firm cloud.
MyPillow helps me get a good night's sleep so I can do my job in the morning.
Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts, not just on my pillows, but so much more. For example, you get body pillows regular $89.99, now only $29.99, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and as you know, my passion is to help each and every one of you get the best sleep of your life. That's why I created my new Giza Dreams bed sheets. I guarantee you they'll be the most comfortable sheets you'll ever own.
With the Giza Dream Sheets, I'm getting the best sleep of my life.
They are so soft and smooth. I never slept so good.
I I love my Giza Dream Sheets.
I started by using the world's best cotton called Giza. It's only grown in a region between the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River. It's ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable, which is why I can give you my full 10-year warranty. But I didn't stop there. My Giza sheets also include full 21-inch wide pillowcases that will fit over any pillow and deep pocket sheets that will fit over any mattress. I guarantee you the first night you sleep on my sheets, you'll never want to sleep on anything else.
Call or go online to order your very own Giza Dream Sheets and take advantage of Mike's Christmas special. Use your promo code, and for a limited time, when you buy one set of sheets, you'll get another set absolutely free. And Mike will extend his money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2021. Giza Dreams are made with the finest, most sought-after cotton in the world. Giza cotton was once preserved for only the finest pressure, but is now available in Mike's Giza Dream Sheets. They feature a beautiful silky sateen weave that helps keep you cool and comfortable all night long. Call or go online to order your very own Giza Dream Sheets and take advantage of Mike's Christmas special. Use your promo code, and for a limited time, when you buy one set of sheets, you'll get another set absolutely free. And Mike will extend his money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2021. Order from a variety of colors in solids and new flannel sheets. And don't forget to get your MyPillow gift card for the best Christmas gift ever. Hurry, this is a limited time offer. Order now.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Inventory is full.
This is Jack Maxey bringing back the War Room here, sitting with Steve Bannon, Fox City Midge, Raheem Kassam. I thought we'd do a little bit of pandemic coverage. But before we get there, I wanted to just remind our viewers, Liz Yore was just on, and I think those of faith, there's a very quick Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. This is what is happening at the heart of the Catholic Church right now. Be aware, people. But now I want to go into the pandemic. We are seeing closures all around the country. This fear-mongering is back in place. But what I want everybody to understand, while we see infections rising, we see the death rate decreasing. I looked at the ICU bed usage in Chicago, where Mayor Lori Heavyfoot has just decided to hit everybody with new lockdown through Christmas. No groups more than 6 people, etc., etc. But if you look at their hospitalization utilization, it is in no way a crisis. And this is true, I believe, across the United States. Now, when we talk about this vaccine that's been in the news lately, Moderna, they came out today, they said it's 95% effective. One of the things that I find a little strange about this, they've given the vaccine to 30,000 participants, 15,000 of them received a placebo. And since then, about 90 people have been infected with COVID-19. Now, the majority of them were people who did not get the vaccine, but 5 or 6 of the people who did get the vaccine also got COVID-19. Now, one of the fears was that if they got COVID-19 after getting the vaccine, it might create a larger anaphylactic kind of response. The good news is nobody who got the COVID-19 after receiving the vaccine had anything other than a very mild case. But this brings us to another thing. You have Dr. Redfield a few weeks ago said, and we've seen this in scientific journals around the country, the general thesis is 3 to 10 times the number of tested infected represents the real infected. But Redfield said himself, and I quote, "It is likely 10 times." So as of today, we have 11 million infected. That means that 1/3 of the country is potentially already had the coronavirus. At 10 times, that would be 110 million, 330 Americans. You do the math. I know it's difficult for me, but even in that one, I can handle it. So one big question that I think everybody has to start asking, what is the purpose of a vaccine? The vaccine is to give you a little piece of the virus so that your body can fight it off. and learn how to respond
I have
in the future.
exactly what you need.
Well, if 1/3 of the American population has already had the virus, theoretically, and if they have survived the virus and created antibodies and similar, shall we say, a natural vaccination, if you will, I do not understand how it is a crisis that is going to require us to be in a state of modified lockdown all the way till next Christmas, as we hear per Dr. Fauci. If 1/3 of the people have already had the virus and therefore theoretically have antibodies to that virus, the same that they would get from a vaccine, why the crisis here? Why does the whole country need to be shut down? People, I think that we all have to begin thinking about the other side of this. There was a wonderful thing that occurred in Denmark yesterday. They were going to try and create a new set of laws that were going to be very draconian. And guess what? Thousands of regular people in Denmark showed up banging pots and pans in the street saying, we're not going to do it anymore. And guess what? They backed down. It is time for the free people of this world to start saying enough. None of the mortalities that we are seeing in the United States in any way could justify the continued shutdown. We are proposing, if we follow Fauci's plan, to leave all of the school children of America in the lurch, for another year? Talk about equal protection. We provide public education. This is what I don't understand. Fauci's up there, and this is my problem with Fauci. Has the task force come out and said this? Has anybody said this? He's out there as a government official on CNN with Jake Tapper. He's throwing out, dropping bombs like, the second or third quarter of 2021. I mean, we've got a balance sheet right now that's got, what, $29 trillion on the, $29 trillion. We've blown up the Fed's balance sheet. We're running record deficits. The economy, I'm telling you, New York City and Washington, D.C., they're ghost towns, right? Completely destroyed New York City. The greatest city in not just in the country, but the thing. And Fauci just kind of wanders out there like he always does. And this is what upsets me so much about Fauci and why somebody doesn't get control of him. How can a government official that's supposed to be on the task force not just rat the president? Oh, he hasn't been in a meeting in months. Okay, be that what it is may, but Pence still heads it up with Azar. How can he walk out there and say, we're going to be, and we need to lock this thing down. We're not going to be through this until the end of 2021. Was that? Are you giving personal? You're the head of infectious disease. Are you supposed to be giving your personal opinion? If that's your professional opinion, do you take it up through the chain of command? I mean, this is what the bombs are this guy's dropping every day, and then they're making all these claims about this vaccine, right? That's to me quite shocking. Okay, we're gonna be back in 5. We've got a lot more to go through. We're going through the math. We're talking about the legal strategy. We're gonna highlight the case in Pennsylvania tomorrow. Okay, the first tip of the spear. We're going to talk about Linwood's case down in Georgia. We're going to talk about the Great Lakes Society's got a case in Michigan going to appellate court, I think, this afternoon. We're going to talk about the math and back of the steal or the attempted steal. Also, more pandemic. Midge is going to have more interviews from the great rally in March. Remember, the rise of this movement is just starting. You're on the winning side. And this is where you can get your daily dose of news. It's a show too tough to kill. See you at 5.
I am forsaken.
Men everywhere are now cutting their hair at home. Are you? Introducing Microtouch Titanium Trim, the all-new at-home hair cutting tool and precision grooming. Just a trim or a full haircut. Now, cutting hair is as easy as combing hair.
It's the only way to cut your hair by yourself. I don't know how people can do it with clippers. It's impossible. With this, it's way easier.
I did this at home. If you can comb it, you can cut it.
Simple.
Titanium Trim reinvents everything with a revolutionary design that positions the blades on the side just like a comb, making it easy to cut your own hair with confidence. Now, if you can comb it, you can cut it. Snap on a comb to dial in the perfect...
Hello.
Man, that's a lot of Australians.
Beware the living.
Well, thank you very much for coming out. It's really quite something to see all of you here. As Dave said, this is the largest venue that we've spoken
about some election, what we found. But the small business optimism index was at its historic highs throughout this guy's administration. 46 years of survey history down the drain, because now we're back to not only when he first took office, we're back now at levels for when he was first elected. Okay, so because why? Because when optimism changes, right? So you know, okay, you have Barack Obama, you have his policies, and during the Obama administration, it was constantly, what's the word I'm looking for? Or the topic, it was tax and regulatory environment, I believe. That was cited as the top concern for businesses under the Obama administration. That disappeared under Donald Trump using the Congressional Review Act. He and the Republican Congress went nuts on regulation rollback, and then that index vaporized, and businesses were ecstatic. They were thrilled, right? And then they had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So that was the end of that. So tax and regulatory, and it really became clear.
I haven't got all day.
Survey data, even throughout the Obama administration, the skills gap was the biggest issue. So we have all of these jobs we're going to create. The problem is we have nobody to fill them because the last generation went to college and got liberal arts degrees that are absolutely useless, and we can't hire somebody with a liberal arts degree, right? So that's what happened there. And then it shot off to the moon under Donald Trump when the economy was going nuts and everything else. All right, so you had 2018, 2019, slowdown happens a little bit, and we heard all of this talk throughout the end of 2019 and in the beginning of 2020 that the first quarter is going to slow. The first quarter is going to slow. That wasn't going to happen. So it was not going to happen. Without COVID, and not just COVID, without the response to COVID, the lockdowns, the economy would have grew in the first quarter. It only shrunk by roughly 5% on an annual basis in the first quarter because of the stay-home orders being at the tail end of the first quarter. The Bureau of Economic Analysis said it verbatim in their press release and their update. This is not like me and my opinion. Without the stay-at-home orders, the economy would have grown in the first quarter. So all of that chatter, all of that talk was nonsense. It was not going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. All right? And then the stay-at-home obviously decimated the second quarter, and then we started to bounce back. So we have the first estimate at 33. So how are these businesses and how are job creators reacting to this? The Small Business Optimism Index was through the month of October. The respondents to the survey cited what they thought the outcome was going to be, or at least many of them. So for most of our surveys, people thought Trump was going to win. But the businesses were looking at media polls and university polls. And they were like, man, this looks like a Biden win. We cannot have a Biden administration, so I'm not feeling very good about my future right now. That is what they were saying. Look, don't kill the messenger. All right? Don't kill the messenger. That's what they were saying. So you look into the Small Business Optimism Index. What were they really afraid of? Doing something like appointing Ron Klain as your chief of staff. Why? Because what's Klain? He's a public health guy. And it gave a signal that we're headed for mass mandates and economic shutdowns. And read the comments yourselves. They cannot survive another shutdown. Many of them couldn't survive the first shutdown. But you're definitely not getting another trillion here, trillion there. That's not going to happen. So they're feeling like their time's up. Their number's up. All right. So then now you look at the consumer sentiment index. It had problems during COVID, but it just couldn't. It 70s, 80s.
I need more mana.
During Obama era, you'd be lucky if it got into the 90s. And Trump's administration, under the Trump administration, we did see highest levels since the boom under Bill Clinton, the tech boom. So that's how long it's been since we've seen that. We saw the longest economic expansion uninterrupted since the mid-1800s. Now where we're at, let's pull up my handy.
I can't cast that yet.
Okay. Throughout the Trump administration, Democrats, because what I do like about this survey, even though Rich is like, no matter how good the survey was, Rich is a never Trumper. So like, he'd always find something.
I will
like
return the favor.
Tariffs. Remember all the tariffs being issued? People are really concerned about what tariffs are going to do to the economy. I mean, our polling showed that was just not true. I mean, people didn't care. In fact, they supported the use of tariffs as a strategy, as a strategy to influence trade negotiations. But throughout the Trump administration, we were getting these record levels of consumer sentiment, and Democrats were just like lagging their Obama years levels from the Obama years. It made no sense. It was pure partisanship. And independents would track closely with Republicans. If you want to know how disconnected, I mean, what they were doing was responding to this survey as if it was an approval poll, okay? Not whether or not it was, their true reflection of the true reflection of their economic optimism. All right, so here we have it. The index of consumer expectations by self-identified party affiliation, okay? You can see that Republicans track largely throughout the Trump era. Republican and independents track pretty similarly, but look at where it's caved now in in this latest index, it is completely caved. Now the cutoff period, obvious, right? But it will be revised. There's a preliminary, and then there is a final. This is the prelim for November, all right? It's not looking so great, folks. It's not looking so great, and that's a real shame, but it is. That's just where we're at, all right? Where else could we go here? Let's look at, I thought I had one more for you. But I guess not. What the ever-loving hell? Oh, well. Yeah, bottom line is, though, there it is. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up and I'll share the screen with you, and then I want to take a look at just the Trump era, and I want to look at expectations versus the actual index, okay? So let's get rid of this. It's just where I'm going with this in case you guys haven't caught on yet. Where I'm going with this is early signs are not good, okay? Let's just look at the EverViz. Oh, man, I'm probably going to have to... There we go. Can they see it pretty well, Laura, or what? No? Kind of? Yeah, it looks like it. It's pretty good. It's decent. It's decent. I'll zoom in. All right, look at the 1 year. Okay, so you did see it start to kick back up. At the tail end of this, right? So you have the long dotted line is the current index. At the bottom, the dotted line is the expectations index. And then the solid line is the sentiment index. You can see expectations completely fell off the map. Completely fell off the map. It's unfortunate. But this looks like it's going to be, what do we got now? About 4 or 5 indicators. And now we have Regional Manufacturing Survey and the Empire State Regional Manufacturing Survey. It looks horrible. The consensus was 13.5. It came in at 6.3. So about half the consensus forecast. It is true it's the 4th straight month that it's positive since COVID, since the shutdown. But you know, future optimism ticked down a little bit. Although, look, mark my words, they will be full of crap on how they report this. So they're going to say things like, well, optimism largely holds firm. But then you look at it and it didn't largely do anything but fall 3 or 4 points. You know, I mean, this is how they will put, convey this until it becomes pretty obvious. What happened is we saw a bunch of uncertainty leading up into the election. And now, unfortunately, the things that people told us they were worried about, they were concerned about, came true. That's right. Came to fruition. And even worse, you have something like, so not only is Joe Biden the media president-elect, right? I mean, because he's not. He's nothing until the states do what they do. We have a process here. And I want to talk a little bit about how nuts everybody is acting to this. As if this has never happened before. It has happened before. We're going to get through it. There will be a swearing in of someone. You know what I mean? I mean, Joe Biden said exactly what Donald Trump said, and they're still having a meltdown. All right, so anyway, everything they said, and then plus some. So the appointment of Ron Klain. And by the way, this is if somebody would go back to document how this guy's comments unfolded during the pandemic, the idea that he would somehow change this thing around is just crazy. Are you going to push out 90+% efficacy rates for vaccine? It's already done. I mean, the hard work is done. It's over. So what exactly are you going to do? And by the way, I don't believe Moderna's efficacy rates. I don't. Why? Because of the adverse impact monitoring. It's shooting. I mean, right? Because so Pfizer comes out and says 90+, right? And here's a dirty little secret, because I have a lot of information that we just don't put public. But here's the dirty little secret. They're talking about healthy populations, the initial runs. Okay, we're not talking about more risk adverse. I mean, high risk patients. All right, and yeah, and Moderna's adverse impact monitoring was actually high compared to Pfizer. So I'm not sure where they're getting this from. It feels like they cherry-picked a subsample of their trials in order to help the market shoot up. You know, I don't know what else to say, but I can tell you that compared to other companies, Pfizer's was better, which is why we always knew that Anthony Fauci was lying when he came out and said, you know, a couple of times over the weeks, in the weeks leading up to the election, he would just come out and say things we knew were patently untrue. And worse, he knew were patently untrue because, of course, he has access to the FDA's adverse impact monitoring. Of course he does. So he would just openly lie and say something that he knew was demonstrably false. It reminded me a little bit of the Nixon JFK missile disparity argument, right? So Kennedy, and I told Laura this, I was like, this reminds me of this. Kennedy knew what he would, or Kennedy would argue that the Russians were beyond us with intercontinental ballistic missiles, the development of ICBMs to deliver nuclear warheads. And he would say, the Russians are way ahead of us, we're so far behind. And Nixon, as vice president, knew it wasn't true. But he wasn't able to publicly refute it and say, here's the evidence, because it was a security issue, an issue of national security. It was not something he could talk about publicly, right? He didn't, right, I mean, we're right. Well, he had the clearance to know, but he didn't have the okay by the administration to put it out, right? Yeah. So he had to just sit there and suffer these arguments that he knew were false. And Kennedy, by the way, he didn't know for sure, because he really didn't have, well, yeah, people
it's
around
too
him.
Far
but
away.
He didn't know what the latest was himself. So, he totally had to just sit there and take it. This is what this reminds me of, because of course Fauci knows that nobody's allowed to release the adverse impact monitoring data until this is all done and over with right now. So they could just claim whatever they want, and nobody would know whether it's true or not. Yes, our efficacy rate is 95+%. Okay, I guess we'll just take your word for it. Folks, not even flu vaccinations are 90% plus effective. A good flu vaccination is like you're lucky if its efficacy rate is about half.
I can't loot that.
40-50%. You're on cloud 9 if it's in the 60s. So, excuse me if I'm a little bit suspicious and a little bit reluctant to just believe everything that these people just shovel out. This is a virus that, first of all, is a different kind of virus. Second of all, coronaviruses, for very good reasons, other smarter health policy people could tell you there's a reason why we've never had a coronavirus vaccine before. And this one is different than even other prior coronaviruses. So all of a sudden, I'm sorry, Laura, I can't swallow this. I just can't. I hope that's true, but I don't believe that it's true. I will wait until they actually allow us to see that and it's verifiable, especially since I know that Pfizer made better progress than them. And speaking of which, this idea that some political person can run to Pfizer and try to hurt the president politically, right? I mean, run to the New York Times from Pfizer, someone with a political agenda could run to the New York Times with Pfizer and say, you know what, no, this was not done under warp speed. Of course it was done under warp speed. You signed a contract with them, and you would be subject to the mandatory wait periods. You would never have been able to blaze through the trials without warp speed. So of course it was because of Operation Warp Speed that you developed this vaccine as fast as you did. It's true Pfizer didn't take any money, but you were still subject to mandatory waiting periods from the FDA. All of the red tape got cut for you. So it's just patently false. You would never have gotten as far as you did at this time without Operation Warp Speed. And anyone honest would acknowledge that. Now, Pfizer started to, and others, well, Pfizer's definitely, because they just have bigger reach. So they started to develop this on their own, and they would have done so without Operation Warp Speed. But my point is, they would never be where they are right now without Warp Speed, because that is what allowed them to do this at breakneck pace. Otherwise, you have to suffer the FDA red tape parameters, and you have to wait. And that's it. And I'm not, it's not my area, but there are actions, executive actions that the head of the FDA can take in the case of, major catastrophes. So it could be chemical weapons, some kind of weapon of mass destruction was used on the population, or, and it's like kind of like a running sentence after the act, or in times of pandemic. And they use that emergency use authorization, and for whatever. It's on People's Planet Daily if you guys want to go dig into that terminology. That's not my wheelhouse. But the bottom line is, without that, they wouldn't have been able to go as fast as they could. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on here. Let's look at this next. Here we go with the manufacturing industry. Let's look at the manufacturing optimism index. Let me stop this. We'll move this over. I'm not trying to be Johnny Raincloud here this morning, but it's important. I mean, if you're going to look at good information, when you want to look at positive information, then you have to be ready for the negative, right? This is pretty sad because, and I'm just going to go down, but look at the pandemic, and it did appear that we were going to pop back up here, and then we just fell again. So fake polls actually do more than impact elections.
Do not.
The actual result and fundraising, they can hurt the economy as well. And here we have the expectation among many people, obviously, that Joe Biden was going to win.
What do you
actually
require?
had an adverse impact on economic activity. That's the reality. So that's why we're seeing headlines in the Washington Post. Of course the economy is going to slow under Joe Biden. Because under Trump, those jobs were just easy to recover.
What now?
Laura, oh my God.
Embrace the shadow.
Hell. Calm yourself. The bottom line is, you have manufacturing that was on life support. You have mining, mining and natural resources that was actually in negative territory. And they claimed that the jobs were the easy jobs to recover. Those were the jobs that were not recovering. And that is why wage growth was rising the way it was. Because higher paying jobs were putting upward pressure on wage growth. It's just, I don't know what magic wand he's going to bring to the Oval Office to stop this, because you can already see the handwriting on the wall. You really can. You can. It's been a few weeks, but what we're seeing is that these indicators are from